All right, the Krueg Show back in effect, and with us is one of my favorites, man. We go back a long way.
Yes, we
I
do.
would say late 80s, early 90s, my days at
Hmm.
Sac State. And this guy took a 19-year-old kid who thought he knew everything and said, you know what? You could be an intern for me. And we've been friends ever since. And he's
Yep.
back today for today's edition of the Krueg Show. Grant Napier, longtime voice at KHTK in Sacramento, longtime voice of the Sacramento Kings, wrongfully fired. We'll get into that later
Yep.
on. But he's with us on the Krueg Show. Grant, great to see you, man.
It's great to see you. And, if you had told me 2 years ago that, in 2022, you're going to be not working with the Kings and the radio
Right.
station, and Larry's not going to be, at KMBR, and we're going to be doing a show on the internet, I would be like, what kind of freaking world are you living on? But, as you well know, this is a crazy business that we're in, and it's great to be with you, Larry. You know how much respect I have for you, and not to pat you on the back too much, but you've been doing this for a long time, and you meet a lot of aspiring people that want to get into the business, and within 30 seconds of talking with them whether they have a chance of succeeding in this business. And you were one of those guys that I'm like, okay, this guy's got a real chance. So yeah, we've known each other for a long time. It's been great to see your success, and again, it's kind of odd to be talking on this format because I didn't think this would ever happen, but that's where we're at, and so you got to deal with it, right?
Well, Grant, let's talk a little bit about you. And before I ever met you, you were obviously an East Coast guy.
Yep.
Tell us about your upbringing and what led you to, from being a little kid having an interest in sports. I would imagine probably playing sports
Yep.
to winding up in Sacramento in the '80s, late '80s.
Well, I was blessed to grow up on Long Island, and my dad had season tickets to both the Giants and the Jets. I was at an NFL game almost every Sunday. We would go to the Ranger hockey games and sit up in the blue section, which is the balcony. Couldn't get tickets to the Knicks, Larry, when I was growing up. It was impossible. The Knicks had won the championship in 69-70, but my dad had his own insurance business in the city, but I was blessed to go to so many games growing up. I played lacrosse at an early age, played also high school football. I played lacrosse in college, but I grew up around the corner as a kid, right around from Christopher Mad Dog Russo. And Chris and I were best friends growing up. And to this day, we're still very close. And Chris and I would be playing games on the schoolyard when we were 8, 9, 10 and announcing them at the same time. And I knew really from about fifth grade on, Larry, that I wanted to become a broadcaster. I grew up listening to Marv Albert. Marv did both the Rangers and the Knicks on radio. I used to record his games and bring him in the homeroom and let my friends listen to the highlights from the night before. I would remember the commercials that he would do. So I had that background growing up, probably for the folks in the Bay Area that grew up listening to the great late Bill King. You're blessed when you live in a market that has an iconic voice. And in New York, that was Marv Albert. And it really got me going into where I'm at today.
So, what was your first job? I mean, so you're working at the campus radio
Yep.
station, or how did it get? Because you didn't just become one of the. I mean, those NBA jobs are coveted,
Yep.
and at a very young age. I mean, how old were you when you first took the Sacramento job?
I started doing the games when I was 28. I had been working after I went to college at Bowling Green. You asked me what my first job was. I actually had a radio station in my high school, but got right involved in the campus station. And then my junior year, I was blessed to do an internship at a commercial radio station that did the Division I hockey. Bowling Green was a national powerhouse in hockey. And the guy that owned the station did all the hockey, but then he and his wife were having a baby. So he started sending me on almost all the road trips when I was a junior in college. And so I started doing hockey at a very early age. And then from Bowling Green, I worked in Toledo, Ohio for a couple of months trying to get my resume tape going in TV. And then got a job in Central Illinois for 3 years from 84 to 87 as a weekend sports anchor on an ABC affiliate. And I took off a weekend to attend a friend's wedding, Larry. And I ran into somebody at the wedding that was a vice president of the company in Sacramento and said, hey, we have an opening, send your tape out. And 2 weeks later, I was living in Sacramento. And that was in the summer. That was, Larry, it's amazing. If I don't go to that wedding, I never know about the job in Sacramento. And then I got to Sacramento, Larry, in July of 1987, and around February or March of 88, my general manager from the TV station called me into his office and he said, hey, have you ever done basketball before? And I started laughing. I'm like, he goes, why are you laughing? I go, yeah, I've been doing basketball since I was in fifth grade. He goes, no, seriously. And I said, no, I've been announcing basketball since I was a little kid. and we won the rights at Channel 31 in Sacramento to do the Kings games. And I started doing the games in 1988 and did them all the way up until I lost my job in 2020.
Yeah,
32
unbelievable.
years, Larry. 32
I
years.
and can you give me, if you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball, or you don't like Sacramento Kings basketball? Because I love that.
If you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball. Oh boy.
Awesome. So I walk into your office and you interview me, and one of the very first things that you said is, "Hey, I was looking at your resume and I see that you're on the Sac State lacrosse team." And then we started talking lacrosse. I said, "Yeah, I started playing in high school." And then you started telling me how you played in high school.
Right.
And I think we even threw the ball around a little bit on campus. A couple of those, when the Kings had off days. Man, those were good memories back in the day. And I used to cut the highlights. There was a lot of people at that station. Juliet Goodrich, I believe, was there, right? She's been at Channel 5 for years and years. It was a small station right there off of 160, kind of by by the Radisson. And you had a lot of success there. Now let's talk a little bit, because you saw the birth of pro sports in Sacramento.
Yes,
and I was there too. I graduated high school in '88, so I was a freshman at Sac State in the fall of '89, or I guess fall of '88. I was one of the things I really liked was that they had the NBA basketball, and it wasn't just a total cow town. There was and I knew as somebody who wanted to do sports, I'm like, well, I wish they had more, but you know what? I'll take my chances at Sac State, and they got NBA basketball, and it's a growing community, and it's close enough to the Bay Area and this and that. And I can make connections. Little did I know, Grant, that here we are decades later. Almost several people, John Dickinson, Deuce Mason, Jason Ross, you name it, Coase. There were so many people that worked up in Sacramento, either in front of the camera, behind the scenes, whatever, who are still very much a part of the media landscape here in the Bay Area. It's amazing how that happens over time.
John Wilson was an intern of mine, and he was one of the best interns that I had at the radio station. And obviously he does a lot of stuff, I believe with the NBC Sports in the Bay Area. But there were I've had a lot of interns that have gone on and done great things. It was a really good market, like just at the radio station that I worked at. Think about this, okay? You had Brian Wheeler, who ended up being the voice of the Blazers. You had Tim Roy, who we don't have to talk about on your show. Everyone knows who Tim Roy is. Eric Hasseltine came from my station. He's the voice of the Memphis Grizzlies. You think about that, it's pretty remarkable of some of the talent that's come out of the station that I used to work for. I've always said this, Larry, the hardest thing about what we do is getting your foot in the door. It's getting your first job. I always tell young aspiring broadcasters, don't just limit yourself to one sport. Keep your options open and get that first job, because once you are working, then you can accelerate at your own pace. You can move up that proverbial ladder. I have a son that graduated from college 2 years ago, and he was blessed to get a job at a TV station in Chico as a news producer. And it wasn't really what he wanted to do, but now he's doing it, and he's doing it very well. He's already been elevated to, the main news up at Channel 12 in Chico. So I always tell young people, just get a job. Get your foot in the door at a broadcasting venue, whether it's radio or TV. And if it's not exactly what you want to do, don't worry about it, because Larry, at small stations in particular, there's always people that they're looking for. Hey, can you do this? Can you do that? And so that's the hardest part about getting started in this business, is getting your first job. So it makes me feel great when I see former interns go on and do really good things like yourself. And the shame is now, so many companies have cut out internships. Larry, I got to tell you, I don't know if I would have made it in this business without the internship that was afforded to me when I was at Bowling Green, both my junior and senior years. I ended up doing Division I hockey. I ended up doing Division I football. I ended up doing some Division I basketball. I had my own sports magazine show twice a week for 15 minutes that I edited, I produced, I anchored. Those were invaluable experiences. I would say in 4 years at Bowling Green, and I don't mean this in a negative, condescending way, it's just the truth. There's only 3 courses that I took in 4 years of college that I can say helped me in my profession. No, I really mean that, Larry.
I know.
And one of them was journalism, law, and ethics. I always remember the journalism, law, and ethics class that I took, teaching you about libel and defamation and things of that nature. It was very helpful. But Larry, in this profession, you exceed and you accelerate by doing it on your own. You don't really learn this business in a classroom. So those internships that were afforded me, where I was actually able to do play-by-play, do my magazine show, that was invaluable to my career.
Yeah, it's funny, Grant, you say that because I was frustrated at Sac State. I was there for a year. I was taking, audio editing, and we're literally editing with a razor blade. I mean,
Sure.
this is how
Yes.
you cut the tape, and this is how
Yes.
you splice the tape. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not going to be how it's done in the future. So I'm really learning nothing here.
Yeah.
And I said to my father, my late father, I'm like, Dad, I don't know what I want to do. And he's like, well, look, slow down. Don't take so many units. Do some internships. Get out in the field, meet real people in the field that you're seeking, and you'll find out. And I did one at KSAC. I was Bud Ferrillo's producer. I
Wow.
did one with
Yep.
you at Channel 31. I kind of started to see the landscape of the media. So kids, if you're out there, if you can, internships are going away because people are worried about who's insured, who's not insured, that kind
Ridiculous.
of thing.
Terrible.
But if you can register at even a junior college,
Mhm.
so then your insurance is covered. Then you can apply, you can approach stations and that kind of thing about being an intern. And I think being an intern is invaluable
Yes.
to your process. So you want to say, what's the key to getting ahead in sports? You got two guys here who have decades of experience. Get an internship, go out there, put your hands on it, and you'll get a, look, taste, feel, you'll get an idea if you fit, if you don't, if you like it, if you don't.
Larry, I was 19 years old when I started doing Division I hockey, and we would go on a road trip. The hockey games in college you had a series both Friday and Saturday. So I would go to the radio station, pack up all of the equipment, and you would double check and triple check, because once you were on the road, you're on the road.
Right.
Get on the team bus. We would go 8 hours to Sault Ste. Marie or 10 hours to Marquette, Michigan, or wherever the case may be. And I would get to the arena on Friday. And I was a one-man band. So you set up the equipment, get everything going on with the station back in Bowling Green. I would record an interview for between the first and second period, record another interview for between the second and third period. I would interview the coach for the pregame show. So I literally did everything. I did pregame, I did the play-by-play with no color man, in between periods, and postgame show. And to be doing that at age 19, and oh yeah, by the way, this was a Division I powerhouse. Half the team went on and played in the National Hockey League. I mean, this was big time college hockey. We'd go to Michigan State, we would go to Ohio State, we'd go to Notre Dame. I mean, I saw some players. I'll never forget Chris Chelios when he came in to play Bowling Green for a weekend. He was with Wisconsin at the time, and he ended up being one of the great NHL players. And there was Dave Poulin at Notre Dame, ended up being great. My roommate in college, my final year, won the Hobie Baker Award, which is the equivalent of the Heisman Trophy in college hockey. George McPhee, who, by the way, now is the president of hockey operations for Vegas, he put together that entire team. He was the GM with Washington for 17 years. He drafted Alexander Ovechkin. So, he's one of my very best friends on earth. And so I'm just trying to give you a vibe of what Bowling Green hockey was like. We had a national powerhouse, and to be able to do those games at such an early part of my career, what is really to this day is one of the highlights of my life. I just love doing college hockey.
It's so funny. Such a small world. I didn't even know. I didn't even know that you and Mad Dog grew up together. I actually worked for Mad Dog.
I know you did.
And he was a great guy. I loved the time that I spent with him. And obviously, Mad Dog Radio is thriving on Sirius XM.
He asked me about you. He did call up and ask me about you, and I'm like, Larry's great. Trust me, Larry will be great. So yes,
Mad Dog was the man. Interestingly enough, you start at 31, but you're not doing the radio. What year did you start doing the radio? Because I always felt it was really interesting, and to me, we'll bring this all the way around. But to me, I've always felt it was really interesting that you, in my opinion, maintained two outstanding but separate careers. You had a talk show host where you were the biggest talk show host in town and had the strongest opinions in town in afternoon drive in Sacramento. And then you're doing the games. What year did you start doing the talk show?
I started doing the talk show at the radio station in Sacramento in 95. I worked at the station that you were referring to where you did your internship at that old station in Old Sac. Yeah,
Yeah. Ted
1240.
Green was
Yeah.
there. And,
Well, I
yeah.
did. I worked there for 1 year in '94. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget it because in '94 you had the O.J. Simpson chase, right? You had that,
Right.
and you had both the Rangers and the Knicks were in the finals that year. And me being a diehard Rangers fan, I remembered very well because I was working at KSAC, and George McPhee, who I was just telling you about, was Pat Quinn's right-hand man in Vancouver with the Canucks. And the Rangers played the Canucks in the finals. And so I went to games. Listen to this, Larry. You'll appreciate this. I went to games 3 and 4 in Vancouver, stayed at George's, flew back to Sacramento to do the news at night on Channel 31, took the red eye to Madison Square Garden. George had gotten me 2 tickets. I call up my dad. I go, Dad, we're going to watch the Rangers win the Cup. The Rangers had not won the Cup since 1940. They're up 3-1. 1994, Larry, tickets are being sold on the street in front of the Garden for $5,000 a piece. Okay. And my dad and I were like, no freaking way in the world. We're going to the game. Rangers lose that game 6-3. Okay. So now game 6 is back in Vancouver. I fly back the next morning to Sacramento, do the news. Okay. Anchor, go up to Vancouver for game 6. Rangers lose game 6, come back to Sacramento, work on the news, take the red eye out. And George goes, Napes, I can only get you 1 ticket for game 7. I said, no problem. This is an amazing story that you would appreciate, Larry. I don't know if our audience would as much, but you got to remember, think about New York. Think about a hockey team that has not won a Stanley Cup since 1940. You got Mark Messier is guaranteed. You got a game 7 at the Garden. So I take the red eye. I land early in the morning. I meet Chris Russo at a coffee shop some few blocks away from Madison Square Garden. And he said, well, what are you going to do all day? I go, well, I have no plans. As soon as the gates open, I'm coming into the Garden. He says, why don't you come in with me? I'm doing the show with Mike at the Garden. Why don't you come listen to the show? And I'm like, you're kidding me. He goes, no. Game 7 now, Madison Square Garden. We walk into the employee security entrance, and they go, hey, Chris, how you doing? Chris goes, hey, right, Johnny. And I walk right in with Chris. Nobody asked me for a credential or anything. We get into the elevator. And the floor, the ice surface at Madison Square Garden is on the 5th floor. I get into the elevator with Chris, get off at the 5th floor, and the press box back then where the Rangers, Marv Albert used to do the games and Howie Rose was literally right above where the players come out from the tunnel. I sat there, Larry, okay, and listened to Chris and Mike do their entire show, some 5.5 hours leading up to the pregame show. Somebody went and got my ticket for me that was left at will call and brought it to me. And back then, Larry, they would rip the ticket, right? There was no scanning. You would take the ticket, you'd hand it to the usher. They would tear it in half. They would give it back to you. To this day, Larry, game 7, Madison Square Garden, I still have an unused, unripped ticket because I already had it. They brought it to me, and I still have that ticket in my possession, a ticket that is not ripped from game 7 where the Rangers beat Vancouver that night 3-2.
Oh my goodness. And then of course the day of the Ranger parade was that night was Knicks Rockets at the Garden, and that was the OJ Chase day.
Yes.
And I happened to be at that point in my career, I had joined the Sacramento Gold Miners, and we were in training camp in Yuba City with Kay Stevenson.
Yes.
And Kay Stevenson, of course, was the former head coach of the Buffalo Bills. So we had media descending upon us in Yuba City at Yuba College in Marysville because they wanted quotes about OJ. You know, I asked the players about OJ. And we're all sitting there, and we're doing a players meeting, and we're gathered around, and we got on one TV, you got, you know, the NBA finals and guys rooting for that. And you get over on the other TV, guys going, go OJ, go OJ. And I mean, looking back on it, very surreal moment. And they turned that into an incredible 30 for 30.
I would say an amazing 30 for 30. You brought up the Sacramento Gold Miners. It's interesting to think that Sacramento had a team in the Canadian Football League for 2 years. And I did those games with Jack Youngblood. And the first ever game in Sacramento was against Calgary. And Doug Flutie was the quarterback for Calgary. Right. And you remember
Jeff Garcia was the backup.
Yes. And you remember how hot it was that day. It was a July night, right? So I'm doing the games with Jack Youngblood, the Hall of Famer. Jack had not yet been in the Hall of Fame, but Jack Youngblood is the salt of the earth. You will not meet a finer, nicer guy in the world. So anyway, we're on camera. We had done our open. We go to commercial. We come back. And Grant Napier and Jack Youngblood. And Jack interrupts me. He goes, phew, is it hot up here? And I said, well, Jack, it could be worse because the Sac State Choir had just sung the national anthem, and the gals were in long green gowns, and the guys were in black tuxedos. And so Jack goes, "Whoa, is it hot up here?" I go, "Well, Jack, it could be worse. You could have just been on the field in a tuxedo singing the national anthem." And this is what he says, I swear on my life. He goes, "Grant, let me tell you something. I'm up here sweating like a fat girl." Okay.
Oh,
and
no.
Now, can you imagine if somebody said that today?
Oh, no.
But he goes, "Grant, let me tell you something. I'm up here sweating like a fat girl." And I kind of go, I pause and I go, "Folks, that's young blood with a Y." And then I just keep going on with the broadcast. But how about that? I'm up here sweating like a fat girl. Could you imagine if somebody said that today? And they
my God.
I know,
run
right?
out of, you wouldn't finish the broadcast. Jack Youngblood was ushered to Sacramento Airport, and he is no longer here.
I love doing those games, though, Larry. That was so much fun going to Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg. I mean, I used to love doing the Canadian Football League.
And I traveled with him too, and it was, seeing Canada as a young age. Tim Roy, I think, did some of the maybe some of the radio. There was a total NFL staff, and that helped me get a job in the NFL with the Arizona Cardinals. Joe Woolley, the former scout with the Eagles, was the head of personnel there. He left to go to the Arizona Cardinals as the general manager under Buddy Ryan. He brought me with him there. I was doing scouting with them. It's a small world. But I wanted to ask you about doing the talk show, because I don't know that anybody before or since has done. You knew Russo, and Russo was obviously on the cutting edge of the genre of sports talk radio at the Fan there in the 80s. But you were doing talk radio and play-by-play. Do you know if you were the only person to do that, or, and probably today, I don't think anybody does it. I know Fitz has, done it, but he did TV and the talk show, but it's a difficult balance.
It
and
is
I want to go there
balance.
Because, and in a town like Sacramento, where there's not a lot of media and there's not a lot of other people, throwing their opinions out, you are the opinion maker, and you're, have access to the team, but it's a difficult road to walk, and you can easily piss off the players. And I would imagine somewhere along the line, you probably pissed off a few players.
Oh, I did. There's no question about that. I think the only other person that I can think of currently, and again, I'm doing this off the top of my head, but it's Michael Kay, who's the TV voice of the Yankees that has a show on ESPN radio in New York. But it is a very fine line to walk, especially in a small market like Sacramento. Larry, I have a very simple set of my own rules when I broadcast. I'm not going to go on the air and BS people. Okay. It's not who I am. You know this. Your credibility is your most important thing. And once you lose your credibility in this business, you pretty much lose everything. So I always tried to be fair. But as Charles Barkley would tell you, because Michael Jordan will not talk to him anymore, it's impossible to do this job without hurting somebody's feelings. Okay, you cannot do what you and I do and do it the right way and do it properly without hurting somebody's feelings. That's just the way it is. Doesn't mean that we get personal. Doesn't mean that we hate somebody. Doesn't mean we're trying to ruin someone's career. But if you and I are going to have longevity in this business, we have to do it because we're opinionated, and our opinions are based on education. It's based on talking with people. And here's something else, Larry. Because of my job as the TV announcer for 32 years with the Kings, I always knew everything that was going on with the walls of the organization. As a matter of fact, I probably knew more of what was going on with the Kings than any other person in Sacramento, with the exception of the coach and the general manager. I knew everything, okay? I knew everything that was going on. I knew trades that were discussed. I knew issues with ownership. I knew personality conflicts. I knew everything. So when I was on the radio, I had a wealth of knowledge. And the fine line you're talking about, Larry, is I've always believed anything I hear on the airplane, anything I hear in an area that is a private area, meaning that if it wasn't for my job with the team, if I hear something in those areas, it does not leave my body. I never once violated that. If there had been an altercation on the airplane, and there was once, they wanted to ask me for comment. I said, I'm sorry, I won't talk about anything that happens on an airplane or a team bus or anything else. That's private. And it wasn't for me to cross those lines. But in terms of players, there were only a few players, Larry, in my 32 years that I upset. Chris Webber, who had a radio show with me pretty much every year that he was in Sacramento, is one. DeMarcus Cousins is another. And then Bobby Jackson got upset with me after the Kings lost in the Western Conference semis to Minnesota when he did not play, and I called him out for not trying to play. And he got upset at me for that. To this day, Bobby and I are good. We have no issues. We play golf. We talked about that. The reality is, and I knew this because I used to have the players tell me, Larry, the players used to listen to my show.
Of course.
They used to listen to my show. It's just like the players listen to you, Larry, when you were on for all those years. So the players heard what I had to say, and I would have to get on the team bus or the team plane the next day. But the players knew that I wasn't being personal. And, the vast majority of players, Larry, not all of them, they know when they suck. They know when they need to be criticized, and they understand it's part of the business. There are some, Kevin Durant at the very top of the list, is ultra sensitive to criticism. And I've always never understood that about Durant. The guy's one of the great players in the history of the game, but he can't handle even a little bit of criticism. He's so thin-skinned. So if you make a critical comment about him, he's going to go on social media. He's going to go irate. Chris Webber was like that. DeMarcus Cousins was like that. There are athletes that cannot handle criticism. Now, because we're in 2022, I'll just put this out here without any BS. I, as a white male, should be able to criticize a person of color without being deemed a racist. I criticize without any regards to ethnicity, religion, sexuality. I don't care what your sexuality is. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your skin color is. What I care about is, are you a good person or not? You're either a good person to me or you're not. I don't have a checklist. Well, he's this color, he's this religion. I don't give a damn about that. I never have. And so when I criticize people, which like you have done over your career, it's not based on hatred. It's not based on we're trying to screw somebody. It's based on how we feel. And really, most of the time, the fans agree with us. So we're only doing what the fans say and what they think, but they don't have a microphone in front of them like you and I do. So it is a very fine line to walk. I was on radio in Sacramento for 26 years. I felt that I could have worked there for 40 years. I had a bond with the community. We had, and to this day, I still have people that reach out to me via social media and et cetera. We miss you. We want you back. I always tried to do my job fairly. I always tried to not make it personal. But Larry, as you know as well as anyone, that's not possible. You're always going to hurt someone's feelings. You're always going to upset somebody. And you, as long as you can put your head on the pillow at night and know that you were fair. And have I made mistakes? Yeah, I've made mistakes. And you know what, Larry, if I make a mistake, I go on the air and I say, hey, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I don't have a problem apologizing. I don't have a problem if I get a prediction wrong in a game. We all do. Who the hell gets everything right? I was very pro Marvin Bagley. I thought the Kings made a good pick. As it turned out, that was a disastrous pick. I had no problem going on the radio and go, hey, I blew that. I was wrong. I thought Marvin Bagley would be a really good fit. I thought it would be an all-star. Guess what? I was wrong. Do I have a problem admitting that? No. You have to be able to admit when you're wrong. It's just an opinion. I was wrong. Don't kill me for it. I was wrong. That's how I felt at the time.
Yeah. I mean, that if you give opinions for a living, you're going to be wrong from time to time. It always kills me too, because so many times it'd be like, you get somebody pushback, player would say something, and Jeff Kent and I kind of went into it in the clubhouse one time. And he didn't even hear it. It was like a third person. Somebody told him that I had said something, and all of a sudden, he's got me. But we're up against the lockers, and it's pretty intense. One time I'm doing an interview or doing the show with Gary in like 2012. Somebody calls up, who's the best shortstop in the game? Thought about it. I'm like, maybe Francisco Lindor, maybe Corey Seager. So we're talking about that back and forth. Then we're at a commercial break. We're trying to decide who we want to have on the show. And someone said, hey, why don't you get Crawford for later this week? And I'm like, oh, yeah, that'd be great. It'd be great to have Crawford. So I go, I'll call Matt Chisholm. So I called down to Matt Chisholm, the Giants. I'm like, hey, we'd love to have Crawford on Thursday. And he's like, actually, he's right here. Hold on a second. Let me check with him. And then all of a sudden he comes back and he's like, Crawford said, why don't you call Corey Seager? And this was like This is like
I know.
10 minutes after I said it.
The
I said, "Are
power
you
of radio."
joking?" And he's like, "No." He says, "Call Corey Seager if you want to guess." And it's like at that point, Crawford hadn't had his bust out year. He's had a 240 hitter. He's a great defensive player, but he's not Corey Seager. He's not Francisco Lindor. And I've got a good relationship with Brandon. We've had him on. We've done some events together. But that was one where I was like, wow, this is a guy who's listening to me and now, is kind of cagey about coming on. Let's fast forward though, because your dismissal from KHTK and from the Kings, I thought was wrong on many levels. I thought you got kind of lured into a conversation. It was during BLM, the beginning of the launching of the BLM movement.
Mm-hmm.
You made a comment that all lives matter. At that point, when you said that, I had no idea that was some kind of code or meant something more than the actual words themselves. I knew where you were coming from, but somehow it went from you just making that statement of fact to that's buzzwords for racism and this and that, and the station didn't stand behind you, the franchise didn't stand behind you, your partner didn't stand behind you, and you were out. And all the decades of and I saw you interact with people of all ages, all ethnicities. Nobody ever made that claim. And then suddenly that claim is made. Yep. And before you can look left or right, your career in Sacramento is done. And I'm just, as somebody who kind of experienced the finality of a job through controversy, man, I had a special perspective on that other people didn't have. And as knowing you and loving you, I had a really difficult time with that one. On a lot of fronts, I just think it was the wrong decision.
Right.
Give me your comments and how that came together and how you felt about it.
Just so I know, we are not pressed for time here. We can go on as long as we want, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I responded to a tweet on May 31st, 2020 from DeMarcus Cousins. I didn't even know DeMarcus had tweeted me because I had muted him, and Doug Christie alerted me to the fact. Hey, he goes, "Hey, did you see?" He called me up and said, "Are you okay if we have DeMarcus on the show tomorrow?" And I said, "DeMarcus who?" He goes, "DeMarcus Cousins." I go, "DeMarcus isn't coming on the show. Why would you even ask?" He goes, "Did you see his tweet?" I'm like, "No, what?" So I looked, and he said, "Grant, how do you feel about BLM?" And I had not talked to DeMarcus, had not heard from DeMarcus in 2 years. And I said, "Hey, I thought you forgot about me. I haven't heard from you in years. All lives matter." And then in capital letters, I put every single one with 3 exclamation points. Every single one I thought was extremely self-explanatory. I don't need to give an education here on what every single one means. So I put 6 words out: all lives matter, every single one, May 31st, 2020. Within 2 or 3 minutes, I realized that had upset some people. So I quickly went back to social media and go, "Hey, I really apologize. I did not mean to offend anybody. That's how I was raised. And that's how I was raised. My dad was a civil rights activist. Not to get on a tangent here, my religion is Unitarian Universalist, and we have 7 principles of our religion. And the first principle is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. That's what I believe in. That's how I was raised. I have a foundation in Sacramento that I started with another gentleman in the early 2000s called the Future Foundation. And over the years, we have sent over 100 students to college. We have paid for a 5-year state-funded education, and we mentor them beginning in 10th grade. And we're talking about very low income, for lack of a better term, underprivileged students, over 1/3 of whom happen to be Black. We have a lot of Hispanics. We have a lot of Asians in our foundation. So I started that foundation, again, as almost like a continuation of how I was raised. My brother, just for sake of education here, was a double major at a very small private college in New York called Union College. It's one of the best colleges in the state of New York. My brother graduated with a double major in both math and economics with a 4.0. My brother was extremely bright, and my brother could have worked for any major company and could have made millions of dollars. My brother decided that he wanted to be a teacher. And my brother ended up teaching at a high school on Long Island that was 90% Black and Hispanic in a low-income neighborhood. And he taught math at a high school for 35 years before he retired. That's how I was raised. I'll give you a real quick story here. We talk about Chris. Chris was over my house, and we were watching a baseball game in the 60s. We were about 8 or 9 years old. And Chris said a word that he should not have said, the N-word. Chris was an only child. Chris grew up with a very strict mom and dad. And when I had been over at Chris's house, I would hear his father use that word sometimes. And I would, even at that age, I was like, oh, no. My father took Chris into another room. They were gone 20, 25 minutes. Chris comes back. We continue watching the game. Chris and I never talked about that conversation. Fast forward to 1995. First year of me doing the show in Sacramento. Chris comes on. Hey, Grant, how you doing? Blah, blah. First thing he says, hey, Grant, how's your father? I said, hey, my dad's doing great. Chris comes on my show, 50,000 watt station in Sacramento, and says, Grant, I've never told you this before. Do you remember that day we were at your house and I said a word that I should not have said? I said, I sure do. He goes, I've never told you this, but your father changed my life that day. And I was just thinking of everything that's ever been said about my dad. That was the greatest compliment that anyone could ever give my father, that he was able to take a young person, because you only know what you know, Larry. Sure. You only know what you know. And my dad changed his life that day because my dad took the time to take him away into a room and give him an education of why you don't say that word. And so that's how I was raised. So now we fast forward to 2020. I made that comment, Larry, because I was watching all the riots and I was watching all the looting on TV, and my wife couldn't even watch it anymore. She goes, I can't watch this anymore. And I said to her, right before I put the tweet out, I said to my wife, I go, you know what? We need to stop this. We need to put our arms around each other and just once and for all break down the barriers and hug each other and just come together as one. So I put all lives matter, every single one. Well, that was Sunday around 6 p.m. on May 31st. And by June 2nd, my career as I knew it was over. Matt Barnes piled on Twitter and said Grant's always been a closet racist.
With no pointed to no, cited nothing.
Nothing. Matt was on the last time Matt played in Sacramento, he was a teammate of DeMarcus Cousins. Matt was on my show every week. Matt played in my charity golf tournament, spent money at the auction. One year spent over $7,000. Matt, that year, we had a game in Philadelphia that had been postponed due to condensation on the floor, and he put out a video on Instagram with a bottle of Hennessy in the locker room with him and DeMarcus. So I went on the radio the next day. I go, hey, you know what? I go, we're adults. It's okay if you drink, but don't be broadcasting that stuff from the locker room on Instagram. Then a couple of weeks later, Matt was involved in a brawl in a nightclub where he was subsequently arrested and charged. DeMarcus, who was also in the nightclub, fortunately did not hit anybody, is in front of the nightclub, and you can go look at it. You can Google it. It's right there for everyone to see, bragging without being aware that somebody was using their camera phone to record him about Matt and sucker punching a woman in the nightclub. So the next day I go on the radio and say, what an embarrassment this is for the franchise to have this go on at a nightclub when you're on the road representing the Sacramento Kings. So I believe that is Matt's way of getting back to me. Chris Webber piles on and says, I've always told the Kings this about Grant. Again, no examples, just that. The last time I spoke to Chris Webber was on my radio show. I want to say it was 2012. It's all there. You can go to YouTube and just Google or just put in the information bar, Chris Webber's conversation with Grant Napier on the radio, or Chris Webber's phone call or last call to Grant. It's right there. Thursday, the TNT crew had been in Sacramento. Kevin Harlan, Reggie Miller, Cheryl Miller, and Chris Webber. 48 hours prior, the city council had voted and approved a new arena in Sacramento. Not the arena that they're currently in, an arena that was proposed for the rail yards. It was a monumental vote. It was probably, to that point, the biggest vote that had ever been held in the Sacramento City Council. Mayor Kevin Johnson, former NBA player, being interviewed in the middle of the game by Cheryl Miller. And Cheryl asked Kevin, now that the city council has voted no on the arena, what are you going to do? And Kevin has to interrupt her. No, Cheryl. They voted yes. We're all good, blah, blah, blah. They finished the interview. They throw it back to the table. Reggie Miller says, and I quote him, once a politician, always a politician. They thought that Kevin was lying to Cheryl Miller about what happened at the city council meeting. Chris Webber, who's announcing the game, who's got his jersey number 4 above his head, had the story completely wrong and went on about a 5 to 6, 7 minute conversation about how bad it was for the Kings, that the city council voted no, blah, blah, blah. So my producer, Jody Bacon, the next day I said, Jody, get Chris on the show and let Chris know why he is coming on the show. Okay. She goes, I got good news. Chris is coming on the show. I go, great. Chris comes on the show. First thing he does, the Giants had just played the Detroit Lions. Me being a diehard Giants fan, Chris being a big, he makes a joke. We start laughing. I knew Chris was not there just based on his voice. I've been around Chris enough to know he'd either been drinking or smoking. It was very apparent to me. I said, hey, Chris, I got to ask you about last night, how, you all had that so wrong on TNT. Well, if you know anything about Chris has never made a mistake in his life. Chris has never done anything wrong. It's always somebody else's fault. And again, I encourage anybody right now to go to YouTube and watch this. Okay. It's unbelievable. You'll be listening to it, but you'll be watching a video, a picture of Chris and me on a still screen, but you can hear the phone call. Chris starts raising his voice and turns it around on me. And I go, Chris, whoa. This has nothing to do with me. I didn't say it. I didn't get the information wrong. And he goes, Grant, you always do this. You're always trying to turn it around, blah, blah, blah. I go, Chris, don't hang up, because I knew he was going to hang up. I go, Chris, don't hang up. And this went on for a short period of time, and then he hung up on me. That's the last conversation I ever had with Chris Webber. And I feel his tweet was to get back at me for that situation, in which, by the way, he and TNT had the biggest story up to that point in the history of Sacramento sports, and they all had it wrong. And I told my producer, make sure Chris knows why he is coming on the show. And she told me that she did tell Chris why I wanted to speak to him. And so he comes on, turns it around, blames it on me. I'm the bad guy, yells at me on the radio, hangs up the phone. And again, that's the last conversation I ever had with Chris. So, Larry, I have no problem putting my head on the pillow at night. I believe that all lives do matter. I believe that there's no difference between you or me or the person that's in the background putting us on, or whether we're doing radio or TV. I've always been raised that way. My dad raised us that way. My mom raised us that way. My brother and I, we live our lives, and we have lived our lives one way and one way only. And not to get off on a tangent, I'm going to give you a quick 60-second story. I'm in Philadelphia 6 or 7 years ago. I just gotten off the air doing my radio show at 9 o'clock Eastern. And I go to a restaurant right next to the hotel in downtown Philadelphia at Del Frisco's. And I'm sitting at the bar. I order a beer. The menu comes. I ordered an appetizer. And about 15 minutes later, a gentleman comes and sits 2 seats next to me at the bar. Black gentleman. He orders a drink. The bartender gives him a menu and he says, will you be eating tonight? He said, yes, I will. He says, I'll need a credit card to start a tab, please. Gives him his tab, gives him a credit card. The bartender walks back. I said to the gentleman, I go, hey, just letting you know, I've been here for 15 minutes and I already had a beer and an appetizer, and they did not ask me for my credit card. Bartender comes back and he says, excuse me, this man right here just informed me that you didn't ask him for his credit card. And I could see the bartender get flustered. And he said, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot. Sir, can I have your credit card? I go, whoa. No, you didn't get flustered. So the bartender started to speak back to us. I said, whoa. I go, could we speak to your manager, please? The manager comes over and goes, what's the situation? We explain the situation. Here's the point I'm trying to make. There's too many people in America that are afraid to speak out. When you see something wrong, when you see an injustice, speak out. don't remain silent. I might not be able to give you a definition of racism right now, Larry. I know what racism is when I see it. I know what's wrong when I see it. I may not be able to give you a precise definition of racism, but my eyes know what it is when I see it. And that night at Del Frisco's, I saw racism. I saw an injustice. I saw a white bartender that was being discriminatory against a black person, asking them for the credit card when they didn't ask me. I ended up speaking with that gentleman who was in Philadelphia. He was a drummer in a band, tours the country. We spoke for 2 hours. I left before him. And when I left, he just said, "Hey, I want to thank you for speaking up." I said, "You don't have to thank me." I said, "I wish more people would do that." So again, I'm just trying to give you an example. That's how I live my life. I see something wrong, I speak up. I see an injustice, I speak up. I've always tried to treat people the same. And again, I don't give a damn if you're gay. I don't care if you're transgender. I don't care if you're Muslim, Islam, Protestant, Catholic, Jewish. I don't care. I don't care what the color of your skin is. You're either a good person or you're not. And that's how I've always lived my life.
Yeah. Amen, brother. There's no question. I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I've never seen you act in any other way. You're very much a straight shooter. It bothered me that Doug Christie, who worked with you,
yep,
did not come to your aid.
You
how
should see
did
my
you feel
phone.
about that at the time?
You should see my phone. If you saw the text, and I have not erased anything. Doug Christie, I considered one of my best friends. We used to go out to dinner almost every night on the road. We used to play golf all the time. As a matter of fact, we had played golf that morning when I made the comment. Doug and I thought, were extremely close. I had helped mentor him to become what I thought was a very good broadcaster and analyst. And the text messages and the phone calls that I had preceding my dismissal of my career at the radio station, I resigned as the TV announcer for the Kings, led me to believe that Doug would be there for me. But here's what I think happened, Larry. I think we went through one of the most difficult times in our lives after the murder of George Floyd. Our country was on edge. There were rioting, there were looting going on. And I think that so many people were so hurt that they just did not care. And I'm talking about more of the Black community now. They were going to galvanize and stick together no matter what. And if it meant someone like me or Drew Brees or somebody else had to be taken down, they would be taken down. I believe there was so much hostility, so much anger, so much hurt during that period of time in our country that I think Doug was afraid of alienating anyone affiliated with the Black Lives Matter movement. We had a shooting of a young man by the name of Stephon Clark a few years prior to that by police in Sacramento. And there were protests in Sacramento that actually prevented fans from going in and watching 2 Sacramento Kings games. So it was a big deal. And Doug became very active in the BLM movement. And I have no problem with that. Be active. Stick up for what you believe in. I'm very disappointed in Doug. To this day, I'm probably more disappointed in Doug than anyone else from the experience, because Doug knows how I was raised. Doug knows what I believe in, because we've had a lot of conversations about that. Doug knows how much I know about his life growing up in Seattle with a mom and a dad, and his life history that was very difficult. And so when Doug was not there for me, it hurt me. And he said to me, and I have messages, "Napes, what can I do for you? Napes, you know I have your back." I'm like, "Doug, you can speak up for me." And I sent him on Tuesday before the radio show, which I still did not know that I would not be doing after I'd been taken off the air on Monday. I sent him a direct quote from Martin Luther King. And it says, "In the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." And I remembered the silence of Doug more than the tweet by Matt or Chris or any of the other detractors out there, because I've always believed, and as I said, and I hate to keep on bringing up quotes, but I use these on my show all the time. Our lives begin to end the day we remain silent about things that matter. Another MLK quote. And think about that for a minute. Our lives begin to end the day we remain silent about things that matter. Yeah, our country was in turmoil. Our country was going through a really rough time. But I didn't do anything wrong. Okay? Not only am I not racist, I actually lived my life to go out and do something to help people that are less fortunate, regardless of whether they're Black or Asian or Hispanic, but it doesn't matter. That's how I lived my life. So I'm paying a price of losing my career when I actually have lived my life the way that I wish other people that look like me would live their life. Because I used to have people call up my show and they would sometimes criticize when we got into anything involving with race. And I would stop them. I go, whoa, whoa, whoa. I hear what you're saying. Let me ask you a question. What have you done to make your community better? And I'm often met with silence. So it's very easy to get on social media and criticize. It's very easy to get on the radio as an anonymous caller and criticize. But at the end of the day, what have you done to make your community better? And there are a lot of people that can't answer that question because they haven't done a damn thing.
Right.
I've always tried to make my community better. Again, I practice what I preach, right? I started my foundation for a specific reason, to help out less fortunate people. When I see an injustice, I speak up. Again, I'm not trying to just be a Grant's great, Grant's God. No, I have faults just like you do, just like anybody else. I'm not on with you claiming I'm perfect. I'm not perfect. But when it comes to equality, when it comes to treating people, I'm very proud of that. And that will never stop until I take my last breath. So for those that still want to deem me as racist, I actually feel sorry for those people. I feel sorry for those people because they have no idea who I am. They have no idea about my background. They have no idea about how I was raised. And if anything, they should be complimenting me and putting their arm around me and going, wow. Okay. But that doesn't happen in our society now. It's cancel culture. It's like, you're done, goodbye, and we never want to see you again. And that's what's happened to me.
Yeah. I feel bad because I had a platform and I pushed back on the number of people who were kicking dirt on your grave. And it really bothered me because I was like, there were people in the media who would go on and on and on and on and on about this. And I'd be like, hey, why don't you shut up for a second? Let me talk. Because unlike you, I actually know the guy and I've actually spent time with him and I actually have seen him interact in many situations. And I stood up, but not as much as I should have. And it bothers me to this day. And I ask myself, why didn't I do more? Fear of being taken down by the mob.
That's right.
In some ways I want to apologize that I couldn't or didn't do more for you and my public platform to help you, because I consider you a lifelong friend and I know what's in your heart and I've seen you interact, and I knew definitively that these claims were wrong. And I never wavered in that belief, but I didn't, get on a soapbox and scream on KMBR at the top of my lungs about the innocence of Grant Napier. I pushed back on the people who were calling you racist and saying that the firing was justified. I said, I know the guy. That's not the guy that I know, but I didn't do as much as I could do. And I feel like I owe you an apology for that.
No, you don't owe me an apology. And I'll tell you why you don't owe me an apology. Because I understand what that period of time was like. And Larry, you have a family, you have children, you have to take care of your household. The Kruegers come first. And you know how many people that I had phone calls with in the months after what happened to me? I'm not going to mention names because we all know them. I'm talking about network announcers. I'm talking about local professional team announcers, not only in basketball, but in the NFL, baseball, and the National Hockey League. I've had numerous conversations with people just like yourself who told me, Grant, I feel awful for you, but there's nothing that I can say because I don't want to be labeled. And I said, I get that. And I would also have people call me up and say, I'm paranoid to go on the air and say something that is going to be misinterpreted or misconstrued. And I said, I get that. I had Tim Brando on my podcast recently, and we talked about this. And he said, oh, yeah, I'm a lot more cognizant of what I have to put out on social media now because I don't want it to be interpreted wrong. I don't want people to twist what I write in social media messages and things of that nature. So you don't have to apologize because we all, and I include myself, went through a very, very difficult time in this country. And there were people that did things back then that probably now regret doing, but you can't turn back history. There are people that wanted to speak out that remained silent. You know who one of the first calls I got from, Larry, after I lost my jobs? Charles Barkley. Charles didn't have my number. Charles got my number, and Charles calls me. And the first thing Charles tells me goes, I just got back from being in New Orleans for 2 days with Drew Brees. And this was after the national anthem statement that he believes in standing for the anthem. You know, it's really a shame that in this day and age, you have to apologize because you believe standing for the national anthem. But that's what happened with Drew Brees. His teammates came down hard on him. And Charles spoke to me for about 15 minutes. And the one thing that Charles said to me was about, you're going to persevere, you're going to be fine. But he wanted me to know, he said, listen, I've been in the NBA just as long as you have, and I've never heard a bad word about you from anybody. And I said, hey, I really appreciate that. It means the world to me that you called. I also had a long conversation with Michael Wilbon. And just the perspective that I got from Michael Wilbon, because I was watching PTI after the Drew Brees situation. And Michael Wilbon made a statement on PTI. He said 90% of white people don't understand why this is such a problem. So I got a hold of Michael Wilbon. I reached out, and he was nice enough to talk. And we talked for quite a while. And he explained to me why he made that comment. And again, this was in the very difficult stages of where we were as a country, right? Kenny Smith, who I reached out to. Kenny was on TNT and said, and Kenny was probably as bothered and as upset about everything that was going on as anyone. And he got upset. He said, you know what? It's not my damn job to educate people. It's not my damn job to educate white people about this. And I reached out to Kenny and I go, Kenny, I'm going to tell you something right now. It's all of our jobs to educate one another. Don't go there. If you can educate one person that has a different viewpoint than you, and it's not based on anything other than ignorance, it's not based on hate, it's not based on racism, it's based on ignorance, and you can help that one person, do it. Do not take the notion that it's not your damn job to educate white people. Because again, it's everyone's job to educate all of us. You know, we're going through a really interesting period of time right now as it pertains to transgender athletes, right? And the Leah Thomas situation, what happened at Penn. So Larry, about a month ago, I recognized this person that was tweeting me, and I hit their avatar to find out who this person was. Person's transgender. So I sent a DM to them. And I said, hey, Sarah, I said, I see you're a transgender. And I said, would it be okay if I call you? And she responded, sure. We ended up talking. And I said, hey, I don't know anyone that's transgender, so I would like to be educated here. Can you tell me a little bit about when you knew that you were a boy, that you wanted to be a girl, and when did you go through your process, and how do you feel about what's going on with Leah Thomas and Penn? And again, I was trying to educate myself, trying to get myself a better understanding because I had no idea. I didn't know. So I just don't think enough people are willing to go outside your boundary. I had Mike Lamb, who I worked with for a number of years. Mike's one of my dear friends, played college football at USC.
Know him well, yeah.
Right? Okay. So I had Mike on my podcast. Mike grew up in Clovis. And Mike said to me, he goes, you know, Grant, he goes, I got to tell you, going to USC was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life because I grew up in Clovis in a redneck community, and I only knew what I knew. I didn't know anything else. And I wasn't proud of some of the things I did growing up. But he said, when I got to USC, and I got around Ronnie Lott and Marcus Allen and some of the other black players, it was a whole new world that I didn't know anything about growing up in Clovis. And he said, I learned a lot, and it was an education. And Mike then goes on and he says this. He says, I encourage everyone to go up to a stranger that doesn't look like you, doesn't sound like you, and invite them out to lunch or a cup of coffee and break bread with them and learn about them. And he said to me, you'll be surprised how much you have in common with that individual. And I live in Miami now. And one of the great things about moving to South Florida, Larry, is nobody knows who I am down here. So when I go out and I meet somebody, we start from the ground floor. They don't know anything about me. They don't know about my history, about me being a broadcaster. And I'm also being very transparent. I would say 90% of my friends down here are people of color. I say people of color because I've met people that don't want to be referred to as black. I've met people that don't want to be referred to as African American. I met a person the other day who is from the Caribbean and very dark skin color. And she said, no, I'm Latin. And I go, you're Latin. I go, explain that to me. She goes, I'm not black. I'm not African American. I'm Latin. And so we talk about all of these conversations. But again, the nice thing is it starts from the ground floor and works the way up. And so I've had phenomenal conversations with people here in Florida that I probably could not have in Sacramento. I'm sure it's the same way you in the Bay Area, Larry. When you meet someone, you don't know if they just want to cuddle up to you because they want to know what's going on with the Giants or the Warriors. And they're like, oh, wow, that's Larry Krueger, man. I can't wait to talk. And again, that does go on what you and I do. There are also people that you meet that are very genuine and you end up being very good friends with them. But they know who you are before they meet you. And they might listen to you and they already have preconceived notions of how you feel and about your life. Here in Miami, that doesn't exist. So I've had some phenomenal experiences and friendships down here in South Florida. But again, I thought Mike Lamb hit it right on the head. Don't be afraid to go up to someone and just start talking to them. They don't look like you. They don't sound like you. And find out about their life and what makes them tick. And Mike hit it right on the head. You'll be surprised by how much you have in common with them.
Yeah, no, it's well said, and I totally agree. So the situation happens, and you're out,
Yep.
and you spent your whole life to try to get to that point, and now it's over. And I went through this a little bit in 05.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of wondering, where were you mentally? Where were you emotionally? And how did you pick up, regroup, and start a new life?
I was broken, Larry. I was broken. I'm sure
I
you can
totally
relate to
understand
that.
that. Yeah.
I mean, everything that you work for your entire life is gone. And again, I didn't feel like I did anything wrong. There were days, Larry, where I used to lie around and think and go, God, I wish I had done something egregious. I wish I had done something stupid so I would have no one to blame. I had Tom Brenneman on my podcast a couple of months ago. And Tom started off the podcast and he goes, Grant, I just want to say this. I feel so bad for you because unlike me, you didn't do anything wrong. He goes, what I did was wrong and I deserve what happened to me. He goes, I don't deserve to be blackballed for the rest of my life. But what I said, he goes, you know what? I have no one to blame but myself. You, on the other hand, you didn't say anything wrong. And so that's the most difficult part of this whole experience is I know I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't mean anything bad by saying all lives matter, every single wrong or every single one. You could make the argument that the timing of my tweet was wrong, and I would acknowledge that. But the intent of my tweet was not malicious. It was not defamatory. It was not discriminatory. Never entered my mind. It was anything other than let's come together. So it was very difficult. I think, Larry, you can probably relate to this the same as I. You were in a state of shock and disbelief for a
almost
period of time.
paralysis. I mean,
Right.
almost like paralyzed
Yes.
by what has happened. It has been that dramatic.
Yes. And I would, this happened in the beginning of June. If I would going out for a walk or I would go to the store or be anywhere, I would constantly have people coming up to me, telling me they can't believe what happened. They were unbelievably supportive. That went on for a period of time. And I said to my wife, I go, I can't live here anymore. She goes, I understand. I said, it's too hard. I go, I can't have the daily reminder because every time I walk out of the house.
And you don't want the pity because that's not you. And I didn't want it either. I mean,
no, I didn't want the pity. You do want the support, though. There's a difference.
The acknowledgement. Yeah.
Yes. You want the support. We all want to be supported. We all want to be loved. We all want to be, anyone that tells you differently is lying. I didn't want pity. All right. Just like you, Larry, you got back up on your feet. And I mean, gosh, right. I hope that can happen to me someday and do what I was doing. You were blessed enough that you were able to get through that period of time and So hats off to you. I hope I can follow in your footsteps. But you're bitter. I had Doug Adler. Doug was fired from ESPN for doing a match at the Australian Open with Venus Williams and calling it guerrilla tactics, not GORGUE. And everyone knew what that meant. It was the serve and volley. And he got fired by ESPN. McEnroe didn't speak up for him. Martina didn't speak up for him. And he was left out to dry and eventually reached a settlement with ESPN. But his career, as he knew it was over, labeled a racist. And I mean, it's awful. So what was it like, Larry? It was awful. I mean, I don't really know how else to say it. You know, you probably know exactly what my emotions were and my feelings were. You know, Larry, I've been on TV in Sacramento, as you well know, since 1987, right? I mean, I live in a small community of Sacramento, unlike you, in a Bay Area with millions and millions of people. So it's a little bit different maybe for you when you go out. I mean, maybe not as many people know you only because of the diversity of the culture of the greater Bay Area and the millions of people. I go out in a small community like Sacramento, Larry, where I'm a big fish in a small pond, and everybody knows me. Right. I mean, and again, the support that I received was touching, and I mean that. I was humbled by it, but I couldn't deal with it anymore. I had to leave.
We couldn't turn the page. It wasn't allowing you to turn the page.
No, huh? Thank you. You cannot turn the page. And now subsequently, I've filed a lawsuit in federal court against Bonneville International. And by the way, and by the way, for people that just want to spend 30 seconds and talk about the hypocrisy of being fired by a company that's based in Salt Lake City, just Google Bonneville International Leadership. It'll take you 5 seconds. Google Bonneville International Leadership and look at their leadership council. Just look at the people that they have on their webpage with their leadership. And then get back to me and tell me that is not one of the most hypocritical, double standards, ridiculous things that you've ever seen. That they're firing me for saying all lives matter, every single one, because they think I'm against the Black culture. And go look at their leadership council. Bonneville International Leadership. Google it and look at their president on their way down and then get back to me. It's a disgrace.
Yeah. I don't want this whole thing to be about that. I want it to be a little bit about some basketball as well. And I did just read this morning, very sad, RIP to Wayne Cooper, who I'm sure you know well. Great NBA player for a number of years and was in Sacramento for a number of years. And we lost a good one there for sure.
Great man.
Did you know Wayne? How well did you know Wayne?
Very, very, very well. And his wife, Denise, and their girls. Coop was the best. Loved the man, the family. I received the news yesterday from Jerry Reynolds, and I was numb. 65 years. I've known Coop for a long time. Love Coop. We had shared many a meal together on the road. Loved red wine. We had a lot of great conversations with Coop. He will be missed, and my heart goes out to Denise and the girls and the people that knew Wayne Cooper. He's a great, great man. Yeah.
Let's use that as a awkward transition to Sacramento. When I was there, it was Big Ben Guillory, Dwayne Coswell, Travis Mays, Anthony Bonner, Ralph Sampson. Mitch Richmond got traded for and was depressed as hell when he showed up. Jim Peterson, Danny Ainge, Vinny Del Negro, the late Ricky Berry. And then, somewhere in there, things changed. And here comes, Weber comes in for Richmond and Peja gets drafted and they pick up Vlade and Jason Williams gets drafted. And all the pieces start coming into play and the Kings go from NBA wasteland, irrelevant to the nth degree to the most entertaining team in the league. And they got this close to winning it all. What was that like for you, Grant, seeing them go from, they couldn't get out of their own way, multiple regimes. I think when I was there, it was Dick Motta was the head coach, and it was a different ownership. Eventually the Maloofs bought in. What was the what was the move or moves or decision in your
Yep.
mind that took Sacramento from nothing to something there in the late 90s, early 2000s?
Well, the biggest move was drafting Vlade. He completely turned around the entire franchise. They signed him to a 6-year, $60 million deal. What's interesting about that year, there was a lockout that year, and the first game was not until February 5th, and the West played the West, and the East played the East. And during that time, I was flying back to Bristol, Connecticut 3 weekends a month to co-host ESPN Game Night, and I would go back there, and they would make fun of the Kings. But then real quickly, you draft Jason Williams. You had drafted Peja Stojakovic previously, and after staying in Europe, he came over, right? You trade Mitch Richmond for Chris Webber. You have Vlade Divac, and the Kings literally overnight became the darlings of the NBA, won 27 out of the 50 games, lost to Utah in a Game 5 in Salt Lake City in overtime, and then really that was the beginning of what was the great run. I got to tell you, I find it very similar to what happened with the Warriors when they made the big trade to trade Monte Ellis. At the time, Monte was the best player on the team. They sent him to Milwaukee, and that pretty much set up the domino effect for the Warriors to become the best team, one of the greatest teams in the history of the NBA. And I'm wondering if that would have happened with the Golden State Warriors had they not made that bold move at the time. If you remember, Joe Laker was booed off the floor. I mean, that's how bad things were. And so you have to make a bold move. Trading Mitch for Chris Webber was a bold move because Chris only had 2 years left on his deal. And the notion around the country was there's no way in the world Chris will ever re-sign with Sacramento. Actually, right. Chris didn't even report after the lockout the first day. His father had to talk to him and say, Chris, you get your ass in the camp. I would give anything to be in your position. And Chris did eventually report. And of course, the rest is history. The Kings in that 2002 Western Conference Finals, Larry, they had that Robert Horry shot in Game 4.
Got tipped back to him at the three-point line, and he sunk it.
Yep, at the buzzer. I was doing that game on radio, and I'll never forget that. Game 5, Bibby hits the game winner. Kings were up 3-2 going back to L.A. Game 6. Game 6 to this day is still considered the worst officiated game in NBA playoff history.
Tim Donaghy, is that right?
No, Donaghy did not referee any of those games, but he came out and talked about the other officials. But Donaghy did not officiate any of the games in the Western Conference Finals. Dick Bavetta, Ted Bernhardt, and Bob Delaney were the 3 officials in Game 6. Game 7, you're at home. You work all year to get a home court advantage, Larry. The Kings miss 14 free throws on their home floor. Chris Webber gets a technical with 5.5 minutes remaining in regulation. Kings go to overtime, and they lose to the Lakers, and that was their best chance.
Wow. And what is the issue now from your perspective? Because
it's very simple.
Before you get to your answer, let me just throw this out. The Kings fired Alvin Gentry, and they've missed the playoffs now for 16 straight years.
Yep.
And people are screaming at the top of their lungs that Vivek Ranadive, who's the owner, who lives in Atherton, that Vivek sell. Right. Is Vivek the issue? Were the Maloofs the issue? Is it the general manager? Is it the coaching? What is the issue? Why can't they get any momentum going there?
The biggest issue is Vivek Ranadive. He will always be remembered in Sacramento for the man that stepped in on his white horse to keep the Kings in Sacramento instead of going to Seattle. So you can never take that away from him. But he has been an absolutely awful owner for the Kings. He meddles. He thinks he knows more than the coach. He thinks he knows more than the general manager. He's been a disaster as an owner for the Sacramento Kings. The franchise, to me, right now is as bad as it has ever been. And to me, I put it directly on Vivek Ranadive's shoulders. It's been awful. It's been terrible.
These are the names that they're considering for the next head coach. Kenny Atkinson, who's down here with the Warriors, Steve Kerr, one of Steve Kerr's coaches, Steve Clifford, Mark Jackson, Mike Brown, who's a great guy. He's one of the Warriors coaches, Charles Lee, Darvin Ham. Those are, according to Shams, those are some of the names being bandied about. What do you think?
It won't matter. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who the coach is. I keep on telling everyone in Sacramento that coaching's not the problem. I mean, how many coaches do you have to go through before you realize that coaching is not the problem? Coaching's not the problem with the Sacramento Kings. So it really doesn't matter. Hire any of those coaches and you're going to have the same result. Until the owner decides that he's going to run the team differently, you're going to have the same exact result. So it doesn't matter. Bring Greg Popovich in. All right. Doesn't matter. Bring Pat Riley out of the Miami front office and let him coach the team. Won't matter. The Kings have had so many coaches with the same result. So after a while, you got to stop blaming the coaches.
Yeah. How about the Haliburton Sabonis trade? What did you think of that?
I like it, Larry, for this reason. I think in order to become a playoff team, you have to have an absolute no ifs, ands, or buts about it all-star. Sabonis is the real deal. He's a two-time all-star. And the other issue with him, and now he only has 2 years left on his deal. But Larry, name me a team in the NBA that's good that doesn't have an all-star on their roster. Kings don't have an all-star on their roster. Now they do. It takes 3 years, Larry, I think, to fully analyze the deal. You look at Tyrese Haliburton, he's got a bright future. Maybe we'll look back in 3 years, 5 years, whenever this is all said and done and go, boy, what a horrible trade that was for Sacramento. They also traded Buddy Hield, who had to go. But I'm a big Sabonis fan. I think it's a really good pickup for Sacramento. The biggest problem I see with the Kings right now is their point guard, who is way overpaid in De'Aaron Fox. He's a dynamic player. He's an exciting player. He's an explosive player, but he just finished up his 5th year. He's bad free throw shooter in the low 70s. Bad three-point shooter with 30%. And I just don't think the way the game is played now, you can win with a point guard that is not a good three-point shooter and is not a good free throw shooter. So those are some of the issues that I see. I would be concerned that you have a guy that's making a max deal. He signed a max deal of $163 million after his 3rd year. He's not a max player. And so that would concern me if I'm looking at it from Sacramento. They don't have a lot of other assets, Larry. I don't know how they're going to climb out of the basement with the assets that they currently have. They're probably going to end up 7th or 8th in the lottery unless they get lucky. So I don't see how they're going to do it, Larry. I really don't. I don't see how they're going to move out of the basement.
It's interesting. Sometimes, you need some player that has a tremendous will. I thought Draymond Green is that guy for the Warriors.
Yep.
When I watch Sacramento, I get that vibe off Davion Mitchell.
Yep.
But he's a 5'11" point guard in the NBA. What's your thoughts on the upside of Davion Mitchell? Could he handle the full-time point and be their alpha kind of guy if they moved off of De'Aaron Fox in a trade this summer?
Yeah, he played very well coming down the end when De'Aaron was hurt with his hand injury. He obviously has to get better offensively, Larry, with his shot, but the guy is a top shelf defender. So what he might lack a little offensively, he gives you defensively. He's got that bulldog mentality. You pointed it out very well. He's only going to get better, Larry. He just finished his rookie season. I think he has a good ceiling to him. I don't think he's all-star ceiling, but I think, yes, to answer your question, I do believe that he could run the show and be pretty good. He's just got to get a little bit better offensively. Again, he's not a good free throw shooter either. If you're playing guard and that's another thing I talk about, Larry, with De'Aaron Fox. His best attribute is getting to the basket, right? And drawing contact. Well, if you're shooting 71% from the line, that's not going to really get it done in the NBA. So De'Aaron needs to be an 80% free throw shooter for the style of basketball that he plays. But back to Mitchell, I like his ceiling. I like his upside. It was an excellent draft pick by Monte McNair and the Kings. Very good draft pick.
Let's talk before we let you out of here on the NBA playoffs. Give me, Michael Malone was another guy. You want to talk about bad mistakes? Letting Michael Malone leave Sacramento,
terrible.
Was not a good move. He's now in Denver. Warriors Nuggets in the first round. When these teams hooked up, and Nuggets got him. I think 3 out of 4. They played Hack-a-Looney at one point to force Kavan off the floor. That was effective. They came back in that game and beat the Warriors. How do you see Warriors Nuggets in the first round?
The issue that I have with the Warriors is which team is going to be there on game 1. If you told me that they're all healthy and they're all ready to go, I still think they're a very tough out. I mean, before they had their rash of injuries, weren't they playing as well as anybody in the NBA? And people were like, "Oh, gee, the Warriors are going to win it all."
Beat the Suns on Christmas, right?
That's right. And so, but
Phoenix.
But do we know which Warriors team showing up there on game 1? With Denver, you're talking about Nikola Jokic. The guy's a dynamic player. He might be the MVP of the league. This is going to be a hell of a series, Larry. I mean, it really is. I don't know how you look at the Warriors right now. To me, when the Warriors when they're in rhythm, which they haven't been in quite a while now, when they're that team, and again, we're talking about Steph Curry right now, right, Larry? How's Steph Curry going to be game 1? But we don't know. That's correct. We don't know. For sake of conversation, Larry, let's say the Warriors are all 100% or whatever, but let's say they're all together and they're all in rhythm. Would you want to play them in a first-round matchup? I sure as hell wouldn't.
No. But, the Warriors turn the ball over. Steph's not healthy. Draymond's
Yep.
got a disc issue. There's no James Wiseman. They're one of the
Yep.
smallest teams. How are they going to rebound? How are they going to defend Jokic? I just think this is a bad matchup.
Bad
If you
matchup.
gave me Warriors Jazz, I like the Warriors. But if you give me Warriors Nuggets, I like the Nuggets.
I would go with the Nuggets too. I believe on how you're playing at the end of the year does mean something. I like the way the Nuggets are playing. I like the way their roster looks. And with the Warriors, it's just Jekyll and Hyde. And the unknown, and Larry, that's the whole key here we're talking about. We're talking about the unknown of Steph Curry. And, Steph Curry, as great as he is he able to go through this period of inactivity, just step on the floor and be the Steph Curry that we're accustomed to? I would say it's more unlikely than likely. So I'm with you. I think the Nuggets are going to prevail.
Two last questions. One, I thought Andre Iguodala, interesting guy. I mean, he's a very smart guy. He's on this team this year. They're giving him whatever they're giving him contract-wise. He's making a fraction of what he made through the bulk of his career. But he came out last week, and he hadn't played all year. Finally, he got healthy. And the first thing he says is that the Warrior front office disrespected the old regime of Steph and Clay and Draymond and maybe himself by not turning either Wiseman or Kuminga or Moody or some of their younger assets into a veteran that could help this group win a title. And then he also said that he didn't think it was good for the development of the young guys because they're being forced to kind of play on a winning team and not be allowed to kind of grow into their roles as NBA players. One, I don't know that I agree with him. I thought it was odd coming from him.
Yes.
It sounds like I don't know if he's trying to like show people that he's got GM ability and he doesn't agree with their idea. My read on it, Grant, is that Joe Lacob kind of drove that whole thing, and he sees how expensive his building is and didn't want to drive the franchise off the cliff for 3 or 4 years by trading these assets for a Bradley Beal, and then 2 years from now, 3 years from now, it's a wasteland and they're hoping on the lottery. So I think he was trying to kind of have 1 foot in today and 1 foot in tomorrow with the idea of filling his enormously expensive arena. That's my read on it. I don't have anything official or any sources, but what's your sense of Iguodala's thoughts? Did they misplay their hand? Should they have gotten a veteran and gone for a title this year with one more veteran piece? Or are you okay with this? They've got a core and now they've got kind of a second core that's younger, that's starting to evolve, but maybe not in time to win it this year.
I just don't know what happened to where players play and management does what they do. I mean, players now want to have a say in who's hired when there's a coaching vacancy, and they want to question front office moves. A lot of times they have no idea what is going on in the front office and the talks that are being made between whomever, right? Maybe the deal's not there. Maybe the deal doesn't make sense for Golden State. I always look at a team's track record. I really can't argue with the Warriors' track record since Joe Lacob has become the owner of the team. You make a great point about the building. I don't know where Andre Iguodala is getting his information from. I don't know if it's in his best interest. I don't know I guess, Larry, like, what's the end result of him making those comments? Is that good for the franchise? I mean, I don't think that's good. That doesn't help anybody. That's the part that bothers me. Those type of comments don't help anybody. I don't understand it.
Yeah. And let's finish with what I think is also kind of an injustice. We've talked a lot about injustice in this episode. But I think it's an injustice that Frank Vogel got canned. They just won the title in the bubble. LeBron, the GM, forces that. LeBron, the GM, had a deal on the table for Buddy Hield, who's a perimeter shooter who I think would have thrived around LeBron. Instead, he wanted Russell Westbrook. They threw all their assets towards Westbrook. Westbrook is a guy who's got to have the ball in his hands. Of course, it didn't work. I quickly bet the under 52.5 because I'm like, oh my God, there's no chance they're going to win 53 games. And that proved to be, the case. But is LeBron, the general manager, the reason that Vogel got canned and they're moving in a different direction? And give me your thought on that. I mean, now LeBron's saying he wants Mark Jackson to be the head coach.
Yeah, listen, maybe LeBron should just buy the team and he can do whatever the hell he wants. Maybe LeBron should coach the team. You know, it's ridiculous to me. Frank Vogel, as you said, is the same guy that just won the championship 2 years ago. You know, Russell Westbrook came out in his press conference yesterday and he's talking about how he didn't understand why Frank didn't like him. And, you know, what did he have against him? I'll tell you what he had against you. He had against you that you sucked all year and that you couldn't put the ball in the ocean. That's what he had against you. He had against you that you were hurting the team, not helping the team. I mean, Frank Vogel wanted to win too. I just don't understand sometimes, you know, these moves. I don't think the Lakers really had a choice here. They have to, Larry, you and I both know it. This is now a new era of sports. They have to appease LeBron James. That's the way it works. And so that's what they're going to do. So if LeBron does want Mark Jackson will be the coach, right, Larry? I mean, shouldn't we believe that?
Seems like that's the trend. Let's finish with this one. You're standing in a casino in Vegas right now, and I give you $100, and I say, Grant, you have to wager on somebody to win the NBA Finals. You're throwing your newfound 100 on what?
Wow,
on what team?
I'm throwing my $100 bill on a team
to win the NBA
Finals. It's going to surprise you. I'm going to pick Phoenix for this reason, Larry. We've seen all the athletes that have kind of climbed the mountain. They've never been able to get over it recently. I think Chris Paul's finally going to get a ring. And I think this will be his last chance. And so for that reason, and I'm not a Paul fan in big games. I'm just not. At first, I'm not a fan of him staying healthy. I'm not a fan of him delivering in the biggest of games. There's something that just gives me the vibe that this is going to be the Phoenix Suns year. So I'm putting 100 on the Suns. Who are you putting it on?
Gosh, you know, I agree. I got to go with the Suns. I thought I know it's going to sound crazy, but when they added Bismack Biyombo, I thought they were a little thin in the front court. But now you got a guy like Biyombo who can give them a few minutes. I don't know what kind of factor he's going to have in the playoffs, but I agree. I think Chris Paul is healthier than he's been at this time of the year in recent years. But he's the guy who brings it home. You know, he squares those shoulders in the mid-range. He gets good looks.
And he should be fresh.
Now evolved.
He should be fresh and ready to go, right? I mean, there should be no issues.
Cameron Johnson, the Carolina kid's a dead-eye shooter. Bridges emerged as a great defender. They got one of the great young coaches in the sport, I think. Yeah, I like Phoenix. I think that I was amazed at the energy in Phoenix's arena last year. And just how much momentum they have. They've turned that into kind of a house of horrors. I mean, it's loud, it's rocking there.
Give me a dark horse that no one's talking about. That, and again, by a dark horse, it could be a 2 seed, but a team that no one's talking about right now that you think could do it. Because mine is Memphis. No one's talking about Memphis, but Larry, I got to tell you something. They're really, really good. And I don't know if Morant is ready on that stage to take that big of a step on his career, but this guy's a freaking superstar. I like the way they play, and they don't rely on the same guy every night. I mean, look at how good they were this year in games that Morant did not play. I would keep your eye on Memphis. They're my dark horse. Even though they're a number 2 seed, they're my dark horse.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that one as well. I mean, here's why. I think they're the top rebounding team in the league. They hit the offensive glass. They block shots. Morant is a true finisher. And it's not just the Ja Morant show. I mean, he's got a lot of help there. And I also really like that coach. I think Memphis's coach is a solid coach. So They gave the Warriors fits this year. I'll tell you the one guy that, my one complaint with the Warriors is that Kerr doesn't play Gary Payton II enough. Gary Payton II, Grant, has emerged as a Michael Cooper-like shutdown defender. He's got ridiculous length. NBA players don't even feel comfortable putting it on the deck around him because he'll steal it from you almost at will. So, I got to give the Warriors some shot.
Yeah, I give him a shot.
Phoenix would be my favorite. Memphis would be my dark horse. I don't believe in the East this year.
And I'm taking my other $100 and I'm putting it on. If it's a big game, James Harden will wet his pants. That's the other $100 I'm betting on as well. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. James Harden will shrink in his moment, without a doubt. Hey, man, it's been a total pleasure. I'd love to do a regular hit with you.
Let's do it.
There's so many people in Northern California that want your perspective, that need your perspective. You're outspoken. You're great on football, great on baseball, great on the NBA. Thank you. I'd love to have you on a regular basis. So let's do that. Let's do that.
I'm sold. I would love to do it.
Tell people about what you're doing right now, and give yourself a little plug here for what your current projects are and how they can, if people want, because there's a lot of people here that really want to know where you're at and be able to kind of consume whatever you're putting out there. Tell them where they can find you.
Listen, I have a website, if you don't like that.com. If you don't like that.com, all my work is on there. I do a podcast twice a week on Tuesdays and Fridays. Some of my guests have been Charles Barkley, Dusty Baker, Iron Eagle, Mike Breen, so we have a lot of good guests. And then Monday through Friday, I'm on an app that you can download right on your phone, or you can go to listenapp.co, not com, listenapp.co, but it's the Listen app. And every day at 3:00 Pacific, I am live on Listen app, and it's interactive. You can call up and ask me questions. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, although I'm not doing it this week, I do a show on a network called NoFilter.net with Sean Salisbury, the former quarterback, former ESPN star. So I got my things, I'm busy. I'm doing a lot of things like you are, Larry. I love the independence, Larry. I'm sure you do as well.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
And you're your own boss, Larry. And Larry, I'm telling you, you're going to do great, man. I'm really happy for you. You're going to do great. I'm thrilled for your programming and what you're doing here on YouTube. And I wish you nothing but the best. And I would love, Larry, I'd love to do a regular show with you. I think it would be great.
We're doing it because you're too damn good, and both of us are so outspoken. Let me throw because one of the things that I do here now is I do it all, right? So Len Dempsey, my great producer, fantastic. We hired a kid away from the Adam Carolla podcast to help us. We've got some sponsors that I want to mention right here. Telmetrics. Let me tell you a little bit about Telmetrics, folks. If you, they're a brand new sponsor of the Krueg Show. And before we get into any of the technical details, let's just talk about who the service is for. If you're an orthopedic surgeon, an occupational therapist, a chiropractor, a physical therapist, Telmetrics is designed for you to use in your practice and will greatly benefit your patients. Telmetrics uses computer vision and artificial intelligence and provides a platform for outpatient rehab therapy services, both in clinical and telehealth environments. Using Telmetrics can improve your patient's experience and much more. So for all your sports injury and physical rehabilitation specialists, if that fits you, make sure you go to Telmetrics.co. They're one of the sponsors of the Krueg Show. And our other sponsor, who was actually with us last night, is our good friend Dan Coach Emilio. And you can call Dan today at 925-628-9966. You can find him at securemoney.com. There's a lot going on in the world, and you want to make sure your money is safe for your retirement. You want to have the security of knowing that your money is growing during these tough times. Danny's got 25 years of experience, born and raised in Northern California, Niner fan, Giant fan, Warrior fan. He was just on with us on the show last night, and he's going to help you immediately. You're going to get an immediate 10% premium bonus on your principal retirement account. Give him a call today, 925-628-9966. You're going to see he's very trustworthy. You can make an appointment and get a feeling for him, and make sure you're putting your money where it is secure. Once again, Dan Coach Emilio, retirement planning specialist at securemoney.com, 925-628-9966, securemoney.com. Fellow Bay Area sports fan and a retirement planning specialist, and he's going to take care of you. And we thank you to Danny, and thank you to Telmetrics, our current sponsors, and we got more on the way. So
good for you.
I just want to thank everybody who's associated with this. Len and Ryan on our end, our sponsors, all the people in the text. We take video calls. We're kind of coming on after Giants games. Last night we had Mark Sweeney on from the Padres talking about the game. He called us on the ride home, Grant. It was very, very cool. I mean, it was very cool. We put up a picture, and he's sitting there and he's breaking the game down on YouTube after he just did the whole broadcast and the post-game show. Wow. So it's that kind of stuff, and all the different people in my Rolodex from decades covering sports.
That's great.
And I couldn't always get him on KMBR for whatever reasons.
Sure.
And now I can get them on here, and we can talk sports, and YouTube is an awesome platform. But Grant, we love you, brother, and
love you too, man.
And it's been too long. Off the air, we'll work out the details on our regular hit. But onward and upward. I believe in you. I believe in who you are,
buddy,
and your career. I believe in your integrity as a person.
Thank you.
And I will absolutely. I didn't stand shoulder to shoulder with you like I should have in your hour of need, but we've already covered that, and I'm going to going forward. So
Thank you, Larry.
As I said, thank you very much for coming on the Krueg Show. And lots of people in Northern California, it's early in the morning, and so we didn't get the kind of audience here that we'll have, let's say, in 6 months.
Sure.
But when we put this out, the number of people that are going to digest this over the next 48 hours is going to be absolutely huge. So thanks again, Grant. And
thank you, Larry.
We'll talk to you maybe as soon as next week.
Thank you, buddy. I wish you nothing but the best. I can't wait to do a show with you. And again, you're the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Grant Napier, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.